Cam,
Mm-hmm.
I need you to do something for me.
All right.
I need you to open Spotify on your laptop.
Okay.
Go to the search bar and type The Empire Strikes Back.
Search bar.
Like you've never heard of one.
Gotta move there's a whole setup here.
I'm sorry.
I'm hunting and pecking right now because I'm holding the mic.
I believe in you. You can do it.
The Empire Strikes
It's going to be worth it, I promise.
Back. It's already not worth it.
Okay.
The Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, John Williams.
Yeah, click on it. Click on the album.
Click on the album.
And then
Right.
go ahead and start a song, but pause it immediately. You don't need to hear it. I just need you to look at the progress bar at the bottom.
Oh, cool.
Isn't that amazing?
Ah! Oh!
We're going to cut that out.
Wait, I think that might have... I can't tell if that recorded into the track.
That was so loud. Maybe y'all didn't hear
You told me to do it.
I just said for a second, I need you to see.
So yeah, because of the interface we use, the audio played through our headphones,
God.
which are allowed to monitor the recording.
And it was the beginning of the opening track of Star Wars. Ta-da! Jesus. Anyway, if you don't know, you should also, listener, go to Spotify because the progress bar at the bottom, instead of just like a bar with a little circle, like marking your progress through the song, it looks like a lightsaber. It's very cool.
That really woke me up.
I'm sorry. You're welcome. Anyway, I don't know what it's like on other music platforms, but go check it out. It's cool. Anyway, welcome back to Second Breakfast. I'm your host, Busted Eardrum. Today we're talking about Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back.
Yes, we are dipping our toe into sci-fi, which is something Maggie has historically despised, but we're working...
Worst.
Yeah. But we're working through the classics.
No,
so,
I loved this. I'm going to spoil it right now. I loved this movie.
So yeah, we're talking about the second Star Wars movie today, Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back.
I just said that.
I have some opening thoughts, but do you want to start with an impression?
No, I really, really enjoyed it. So I had mentioned before, if we already did episode 4 back in December. Go check that out. I had seen that one like a million times. Until the other day, I had not seen this movie all the way through ever.
Wow. Okay.
Like I had seen random scenes and bits and stuff, and I knew generally the plot, but like I didn't know what was going on. And so this was my first like full viewing of it, and I loved it. I liked it more than the first one. I think it was a better story. I think it was better directed. I mean, duh. And just I really, really enjoyed it. I had a great time.
See, I'm a boy and a millennial, so I've seen
Right.
this movie 1,000 times.
I am a millennial, but somehow it didn't happen for me.
But I haven't seen it in a long time. So as it was going, I would recognize set pieces or moments, but I hadn't seen it since I had developed taste.
Right.
So I didn't notice anything
Yeah.
the first 100 times I saw it.
Yeah.
And this time I was really impressed with it. I
Yeah.
feel like I saw a lot of the structural, a lot of the fun things that happened in the script, the way they shook up the characters and the combinations of characters. I was really impressed by this. It was so different from the previous one,
Yeah.
but just as good, if not better.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a great time with it. I'm excited to dive in and talk about it. I don't know. Where do you want to begin with this?
Well, I had sort of a headline look at how this movie is different from the previous one. I think that's sort of a helpful way to begin.
Okay.
My big takeaway once we finish this movie is that they broke up the crew.
Yeah.
They didn't really have Mark Hamill talked to Harrison Ford. Han and Luke talked a little bit at the very beginning when Luke was getting in the X-Wing.
Yeah.
To
and
go
when
fly
he
off.
like saved him in the snow or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But besides that, then they diverge for the rest of the movie.
And then Luke and Leia aren't reunited until the very end.
Right.
Yeah.
So you get those little moments of crossing over, but you don't really get the trio
No.
in the same way the first movie was a perfect trio film. And that's so dangerous because the chemistry of that group, the romantic competition of that group was so much fun.
Right.
So what a risk to break up the crew and that charisma, that X factor.
Yeah, really.
But you're playing with a bunch of new ideas in all of those individual storylines now. So the first storyline is Han, Leia, Chewie, and C-3PO. Interesting again to break up the droids.
Yeah.
So because that was the other kind of chemistry that was essential to the first movie.
Right, because R2's with Luke.
So this group of characters is on the run. They're scrambling and running. The entire movie for them is a string of failures and struggles.
Totally.
Which is the best.
Yes.
That's all I want from genre fiction is overwhelmed but charming heroes.
Yes.
It's such a shortcut to interesting storytelling. And those scenes taken together, like say you cut all the other plot lines out of the movie and just watch the Han, Leia, Chewie, C-3PO cut, it is one like long nipping at your heels chase scene.
Yeah.
Almost like a Mad Max Fury Road kind of thing.
Right.
They're just running, and they're outrun almost every time. Oh, they got away to Cloud City. Darth Vader's already there.
Oops.
Oh, they got away and hit on the asteroid. They're in the mouth of a beast. Like, every time they're losing and running. It's such a great flip of that sort of righteous cause where they're all together, and there's kind of a safety blanket in the first movie. This one's just constant L's, which I loved.
Which is a great, like, counter or balancing with what Luke's doing, which is like he's sedentary on an island, not an island, but it feels like it's on an island.
Do you mean Dagobah? The swamp planet?
I couldn't have told you what the name of that planet is. I know the ice one is Hoth.
Yeah.
But he's on this, like, in this isolated world with Yoda, just learning how to be a Jedi.
Right. And this plays into more of the stuff you and I talk about, mostly lately in the context of The Witcher, but earlier it's what we mined out of Tolkien.
Right.
And it's philosophy. Luke and Yoda, that's almost the whole plot line. It's their direct, it's all conversation. There's action almost as B-roll, but it's just the clash of their worldviews. And what I got out of it this time that I couldn't have the other times is that it's a meditation on the concept of the impossible. And Yoda's trying to train Luke about the Force, I guess, but more about self-imposed limitations.
Yeah, totally. He's just his therapist.
It's fascinating.
All he is, yeah.
And then you have this other group of characters. And these people don't even share a scene that often. Maybe it's a category of the rest of the characters in the story. And I'm grouping those up as Lando Calrissian, Darth Vader, and this funeral procession of Imperial officers that we briefly get to know.
Sure.
And this group of characters, if you sort of scatter it between them, they are the new home of moral grayness.
Yeah.
We talked about this in A New Hope, the previous Star Wars movie, as Han Solo being the morally gray character.
Right.
And now that Han is officially a good guy, he's very much on the team here. For 1 second he mentions maybe leaving, but even he doesn't seem to believe it at this point.
And it's like he says he needs to leave just because he's like worried about like being tracked down and killed, not because he's I gotta go, I hate y'all. It's like Jabba might kill me, I should go pay him.
So we take all of the moral grayness that was in Han in the last movie, and we break it up and scatter it amongst these new characters to hold it as an object of interest and look at it through all of these different prisms. So through Lando, we get to see a clash of priorities and sort of profiteering on the back of this raging war. Through Darth Vader, we get the conflict about service to the Emperor or this worthy cause, and then the personal fascination. In the first movie, Han seemed pretty fascinated with Luke and Leia as characters, as friends. I think he has Chewie, but he doesn't seem to have that many friends besides the tall dog who's his co-pilot.
Right.
In the same way, Vader has this fascination with Luke. And we know by the end of the movie why, but it's compelling even besides that.
Right.
And then those officers. We get to meet so many of them, and then they get force choked and killed. But they see these war crimes as career moves. In the same way the first movie condemned Han for seeing bounty hunting as a profession, as a career move, and that he would leave the Empire once it stopped being profitable. He kind of paid them back, and then he would move on to making his finding the gold mines of I don't know, killing and stealing people in those weird gray. What was that called when they froze him at the end?
Oh, I don't know what that's called.
Carbonite. Frozen in carbonite.
Yeah.
Anyway, we also see some new characters of bounty hunters who become that new obvious home of self-interest.
Yes.
Which was so condemned in the first movie. And that's where you get someone like Boba Fett.
Right.
Who I loved as a kid because he looked cool.
He does look cool.
But I love him now because he is a ghost or a shadow. He's guilt. He is almost literally old Han chasing new Han.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
And I loved
Which
that
is
wrinkle.
really interesting when you know that he becomes a clone of himself.
No, he is a clone of himself.
Yeah, okay. So that's even more confusing. But yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
no, I like you like comparing like the way that the structure has stayed the same but has shifted in a unique way. I think that's pretty cool.
I want to take a second to talk about George Lucas
Okay.
as the architect of this whole world.
Yeah.
I was really struck in this movie by his artistic fearlessness, really creating a world and digging so much deeper into it than last time you sort of get the pure spectacle of invention and imagination and it's new.
Right.
And here you go deeper.
Yes.
And I think it's as impressive. But balancing that fearlessness is a simultaneous humility. So he's got a story credit. And he's definitely the inventor, the mastermind, the guy behind these movies. But he does not have a screenwriting credit. He may have rewritten it at one point after one of the screenwriters died. But he also hired a director.
Yeah.
So he's stepping back from all of those roles after pioneering it the first time. The director, who did a bunch of war movies, was like his professor in film school or something that he went to go get.
Yeah.
And then one of the screenwriters was a guy who he'd hired for Indiana Jones. And I totally I loved the auteur nature of the first one, but I really respect the humility here of hiring people better suited to this very different type of movie.
Absolutely. And it paid off. It wasn't like, oh, I don't trust myself anymore. It wasn't an insecure decision, I don't think. It doesn't seem like it. Like to like, oh, I'll get someone who's like more established. And then they just end up putting out like the corporatized Disney-fied version of your amazingly unique story. Instead, it was just experts who could do what he wanted to do in a more, just in a fuller way.
Right. It wasn't derivative. And I love the visual style and tone of the first movie. And that tone is not present here. But it has its own stunning, the visuals, the tone, the sort of maturation of themes, I thought was really striking. There were so many shots through this movie that were so beautiful and calm and epic.
Yeah.
All of those solo Darth Vader scenes where he's in that weird little pod, that like eggshell
his
pod
little
thing.
mind palace. Yeah.
Or even the scenes of him standing in front of the window and the way the you see the reflections off the helmet.
Yeah, totally.
The way you see him framed against the other officers.
Yeah.
They shoot him, from above or below to make him look large, but even the way he talks to them, the way he's positioned in every shot tells you so much about his power and majesty.
Yeah, it felt like there were so many creative shots. It was very like intentional and artistically done.
There was such a color palette to this one. Obviously, you have the Cloud City was all orange when you're flying up to it. And when you're flying up to Dagobah, it's all green. But everything else was this gorgeous grayscale. I think a black and white version of this movie would be very interesting.
Oh, wow.
If not just for that sort of classic feel, but I think to see how much of it is starkly, almost totally white and black. There's this static, sparse, industrial feeling. Whenever you're inside anything the Empire controls,
Yes.
and you have so many of those stewing military shots where you see one of those Imperial officers melting down or freaking out, but that backdrop is that, it looks like an Apple store.
Yeah,
And then you're on Hoth,
yes.
which is, of course, a snow planet.
White.
So that's all white. And then all those catacombs that Han and Leia are running through as they're trying to escape Hoth. You have, again, all those industrial hallways.
Yeah.
Luke sneaking through Bespin, the Cloud City thing, to find Darth Vader.
Oh, yeah.
And then that fight on the stairs, there's such stark, harsh black and whites.
Yeah.
The contrast is so beautiful in this one. And it's so different than the previous one.
Yeah, it is. The previous one is just, it feels more, I mean, there are definitely those like stark black and white moments, but there are just so many bright colors. I mean, like, because they're on Tatooine in the beginning, right? Like that's all like bright oranges and the bright blue of the sky. And then I just feel like
it's color.
It's just there's a lot of color.
You have those two suns setting
right.
on Tatooine. You see the sand, you see the pink, and you see the lights glowing out of every droid's eye. You get bright colored lightsabers and then the clash of different colors of lightsabers.
Right.
It's all color and imagination in this explosion of a world.
Yeah, right. And this is more a bit starker. I mean, just it's a darker story. It's a darker tone. It would be really cool if the whole movie is black and white, except for the scene with Vader and Luke when they're fighting. Because that bright orange background, I mean, that scene was the coolest thing I've ever seen. I don't know how I've never seen that scene. I had seen the moment, the I'm your father moment. And like, I knew that as soon as the scene started, I knew that was coming.
But the fight before that's way cooler.
No, and I had no idea this was there.
Yeah.
It was awesome to experience that for the first time.
And the use of smoke, it almost pulled me back to Alien.
Yeah.
Which is the best smoke ever in a movie.
Totally.
And not that long before this.
No, yeah.
Yeah, I love that it's pulling in some of that. It has, I don't think there's any argument that this is anything close to a horror movie, but it can borrow that aesthetic. Right. Because that scene is terrifying.
Yeah, and he's scary, right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Vader's definitely a slasher. Yeah, maybe he's Michael Myers. Whatever. We'll get into that in another episode.
I mean, well, did you want to talk more about that scene?
Sure. What you got? Yeah.
I just think it was really, really cool. And I was really thinking, oh, that's probably in the third movie. Like, I don't know. But I guess it makes more sense to be in the second one, because then the third one would be when, after you know this man is your father, you then seek revenge. So I guess that would make more sense.
So, but how did it compare to other, I mean, lightsabers, they're just swords with pretty colors.
Yeah, but like, okay. As great as the scene with Obi-Wan and Vader is, the combat is not good.
Oh, it's pretty rough.
In the first one. Like, it's pretty lame, honestly.
It's simple.
It's just like, it's like, this is a cool concept, but when you've seen like the lightsaber fights in the prequels, which are pretty cool, you're like, come on. But this was like awesome. You can tell they did their homework on sword fighting, and like, it was really
choreography.
Yeah, it was really well done.
So how does this compare in aesthetics or emotional weight or build up? How does it compare to other big duels in genre fiction?
Like, I don't know, what are you thinking? Like the Mountain and the Viper, or like or the Hound and Brienne, or
I don't know, Saruman, Gandalf.
Yeah, right. I mean, it hit pretty hard. I mean, again, it was more, it didn't have the groundedness that something like Game of Thrones has. It didn't have the, I mean, it was a bit more romantic than some of the other things we've seen. But I liked that. And I still don't love Luke as a character. I think if I liked Luke more, then it would have been more impactful. Because as interesting as the scenes with Luke and Yoda were, the whole time I was like, but what's happening with Han and Leia? That's all I care about right now. Mostly because of their romance, but whatever. But I appreciate that Yoda like really like slapped Luke around, be like, hey, you're being a whiny little bitch. Like, maybe get your life together. Because he is so whiny. He's better in this movie, but I still was like, I think I would have been more devastated for Han than I was for Luke. Like, if that had been Han's story, like finding out his father is this thing and losing his hand.
And I guess you sort of get that in reverse in Force Awakens. Because that's where, at the end with him and Kylo Ren.
I don't remember anything.
You don't remember
it's his son.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's his son.
But that's where you find that out.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the wrong one dies.
Yeah, oopsie. Yeah, oopsie.
Hello to our ice machine making a surprise appearance.
I'm so sorry. It just decided that today
the AC's going too.
It's all going nuts. Maybe y'all can't hear anything.
It's like the Beauty and the Beast.
Our ice,
and all of our appliances just dancing around in the background.
Our ice machine every single day terrifies me.
Yes.
It always sounds like someone breaking into our apartment.
Sure.
Anyway, I think what also made the scene with Luke and Vader really effective was that it wasn't just one long drawn out scene. It was intercut with other scenes, like with what was happening with, again, Han and Leia, which, you know, is an easy shortcut to increase your suspense. But it just also made the scene feel like it was so long, and not like in a this is dragging out, I'm bored kind of way, but in a this is exhausting kind of way, because they kept changing locations and they kept learning more. Like Luke keeps learning more information and is like becoming more and more confused and distressed and upset, and you can kind of see Vader almost like losing control a little bit because he's like so desperate to like, I don't know what his goal is
convert
with
him.
Luke. Yeah, I guess so. Like, not to like reconnect with his son, but like to do something with him,
recruit him,
right, and like to maybe to justify everything that he's done. Just, you know, to, I don't know. But so you can see like all of that building and that makes the climax of that scene so much more effective.
We've gotten 2 duels now in this franchise, and neither of them are traditional duels where people meet in a battlefield and want to kill each other.
Right.
the first one with Obi-Wan and Vader, there's all that emotional subtext, and we know that Obi-Wan is just delaying him, and that he plans to die anyway.
Yes.
Which might explain why it looks kind of limp.
Maybe
because his heart's not in it, and he's half watching to see if they're
Yeah.
on the Falcon yet.
But also, for your first lightsaber fight, you gotta
Maybe.
step it up a little.
But this one has
Yeah.
that similar subversion because I
Yeah.
don't think Darth Vader wants to kill Luke at all.
No, he totally doesn't.
So he's delaying the fight the whole
Yes,
time.
because the whole time I'm thinking, okay, like Luke's been trained well. I believe that, but also I think Vader could kill him in a second if he wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
And he doesn't because he's trying to convert him. So that's also really interesting.
He could also kill him without the lightsaber, like he kills all of his underlings.
Yes.
Interesting, though, to delay that traditional duel.
I think it's also interesting. Yeah, I think it's also interesting to... The scene works more because you had the scene in the cave with Luke, where he like goes into that like mind cave and like sees Vader as himself, or himself as Vader.
Right.
I guess he sees himself like basically being his own undoing,
And
so that makes the temptation of conversion all the more compelling.
right, or plausible.
Right.
That he could have gone bad.
Right. Yeah. So that's also really. Yeah, I really liked that.
So do you think we're building, if we're looking at other genre trilogies, do you think we're building to some sort of Frodo moment? Where maybe he goes bad for a second and then, Sam has to slap him around and bring him back?
I could totally see that, and I'm glad you brought up Frodo because I just noticed a couple fun little Easter eggs.
Yes, you did. I made you write them down because you were just barking them at the screen.
And I was like, I guess I should write these down. And I really hate to just be I don't want us to just be the people like, this is like Tolkien. Oh, like
Right.
that's so tired. But
George Lucas is pulling from what works.
right, like
a lot of hero's journey
like
stuff.
think exactly. We've got hero's journey. We've got like fantasy, expansive world. Like these movies come out in the late 70s. Lord of the Rings published in the 50s. I'm just saying.
Sure.
There's, and I think Tolkien had quite a big popularity in the 70s actually. But anyway. Just a couple of things I noticed at the very beginning of the movie when when Luke has been captured by the like abominable snowman, whatever the hell that thing is.
Yes.
And he's like hanging upside down in the cave. I was like, Frodo in Shelob's lair being strung up on the webs.
Also, a little
What?
Easter egg side tangent there. Do you remember season 2 of Mando? Remember that ice episode with all the ice spiders?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Those were concept art that weren't used for this movie.
Well, that's pretty cool.
That they brought back in Mando. So we could have literally had an ice Shelob.
Well, there
But
it is.
the snowman from the Rudolph special is much more fun.
Why is he in this? I was confused. I mean, the creature looks cool, but all I could think of was that snowman from Rudolph.
You loved the Tauntaun scene.
I did. Yeah, those things were so funny. But then, if you think about that, and then you think about Han coming to rescue Luke instead of Sam coming to rescue Frodo, Han is a delightful counterpart to Sam. I mean, they're both good, loyal friends deep down, but Sam is outwardly good and kind and vulnerable and emotional, whereas Han is guarded and, doesn't display his emotions and pretends to be this scoundrel when deep down he's a big softie.
Right.
So I like that it's not a one-to-one. I enjoy that sort of complication, especially if in the first movie we're thinking of Han as our Gollum. The other funny comparison because it was on my brain at this point, when the Empire starts attacking Hoth and they're what are the AT-ATs?
Good job.
Those big walking robot dog things. I was like, Oliphants. Like that's what those are.
Yes.
Like that's all I can think of. Like these big giant, like because they're used by the Empire, right? Like the enemy is using them, right? And which is how the Oliphants are used by Sauron's armies. So, I mean, again, not one to one. I know it's more complicated than that, and I'm not trying to say George Lucas was like, what's my version of an Oliphant?
Right, but there is a structure that works. I remember George R. Martin joke. He was saying that the difference between fantasy and sci-fi is like what
location.
the furniture looks like.
Yeah, it's aesthetic. It's purely aesthetic.
Right.
No, I mean, I think the best sci-fi, well, I should back up. In my opinion, the best sci-fi is just fantasy with different aesthetics.
Space fantasy.
Like this. Versus, I think sci-fi as it was coined and defined is more about like taking like concepts in science and figuring out like what if it was like this, like
technology.
What if technology could do this? And it's more like thought experimenty, which is why Star Wars isn't all that sci-fi in a technical like definition sense.
It's not hard sci-fi.
Yeah, that kind of sci-fi I find so uninteresting. I'm so happy if you love it. I'm not like trying to say you suck if you like it, but I just so don't care. Yeah. But this is like way more fun.
I would like this year, now that it's 2023, I want to dive into some of that more and just try it and see what you think. Even the classics. Like we could do an Alien episode, we could do Blade Runner, just some...
Well, Alien's not sci-fi, it's horror. So I'm down.
Is it? Is it?
Yes.
So yeah, we could dive into stuff like that.
We could, but yeah. And so, what was I? Also, sorry, I got sidetracked. Like playing with that sci-fi concept, though. I think this movie does that because you have like over and over and over, they're unable to go into light speed.
Yes.
Like to go into hyperspace. Like they can't do it. Like they have this, because like so much of the first movie is like, oh, what if we had spaceships that could go as fast as light, and like. That's the thought experiment. And here it's like, oh, we can't do it because our ship's broken.
This is a beautiful transition into the next thing I wanted to talk about.
You're so welcome.
So there's a John Cleese quote when he was talking about Fawlty Towers, which is one of the most legendary sitcoms of all time. 12 episodes, 2 chunks of 6 episodes. And he was talking about season 2. And this structure has become famous in British sitcoms. You have The Office, you have Fleabag. They all follow this structure. And John Cleese was talking about season 2 being, you should treat it as like your last shot at this thing, and you should explore all of it. Throw the kitchen sink at it. Do everything you ever wanted to do with the story, and then get out before it gets stale. And I love that what if framing that you just gave this, because Empire Strikes Back, I think it tests this world and kicks the tires. So it's full of all of these what-if scenarios that, like you said, are very different than the kind of exploratory wonderings that we got in the first movie. The first one that I wrote down, this is good little symmetry between us, is what would happen if the gang lost all of their advantages and get out of jail free cards? So instead of technology being a shortcut or an advantage, or, there's a hyperspace to get us out of this problem. The hyperdrive is broken for the entire movie. And it's so explicit that would solve this problem and the next problem and the chase scene that makes up this whole movie. So if you lose that, and you lose most of your allies because they're either gone, dead, or untrustworthy, what happens next? What happens if they're stranded and split up and they don't have these tools and they're trying to fix the Falcon for most of the movie? And then they don't even have the Falcon. Then Lando's in there.
And then C-3PO's torn into pieces. The
second what if that I noticed is, what if Han hadn't become a good guy in the last movie? And that's where you get some of those soft thought experiments. Lando. You get all of that self-interest coming back.
Right.
And even someone like Boba Fett, who's a darker version of that, but also very plausible that Han could end up as Boba Fett.
You could totally see that. Exactly.
And of course, you can read that into some of the Imperial guys. But the third what if is, what does the bad guy, and this could apply to all genre fiction, what does the bad guy tell his boss when the hero escapes at the end of every movie?
I don't know. Just, what do you mean?
Like, what does the Imperial officer do when he has to go see Vader and say, oh, John Williams played a really rousing score and they escaped at the end of the fucking movie again?
Yeah, they usually are just killing themselves. Like, that's a suicide mission.
We see half a dozen generals have to go crawling back to Darth Vader and get force-choked out because they say, well, oh shucks, the hero slipped through our fingers again.
Sorry.
So we see the consequences of that. They're not just characters on a hook who don't exist unless they're in a scene with us. We see that background stuff. We see their performance reviews with Darth Vader. And then, this is such a cool escalation in this movie, we see that idea doubled down upon. The original question was, what does the bad guy tell his boss when the hero escapes? We find out in this movie that the guy we're absolutely terrified of, who's hulking and stalking through every scene and could massacre everyone in the movie, he has a boss. And we see Vader has to go crawling to the Emperor.
That is pretty cool.
So we introduce our big bad by showing the previously unstoppable big bad humbled, afraid, down on one knee.
Literally dwarfed in comparison.
Yes,
right.
It pays dividends. It makes the Emperor titanic, even more so than his hologram does.
Yes.
In that beautifully framed shot of tiny Vader on a knee, huge Emperor hologram kind of glowering down on him.
Yeah.
It's such a fantastic character introduction.
Yes.
And it also feels born of those what-if questions, those technical, well, what would happen if this, that, and the other thing? Its consequences. I thought that was such a great in-the-weeds way to introduce the big bad guy.
Yeah, and then it makes you even more curious about where this could possibly go in the third one. Because this movie very much, like, we talked a lot about how the first movie, the episode 4, it could totally sit on its own. It could be a standalone movie, just a little, like, slice of a chapter of a big, expansive world. Like, it could just exist on its own and that's it. Very fortunately, it does not. But this one is like, they so clearly have a next episode in mind. Like, because you have it's like, it's building off of what happened in the first one. So it's like clearly a sequel. But also at the very end, our group is split off and they're all about to go take on the next big thing. And it feels like a cliffhanger. Like, is Han really dead? Like, where's Luke? Where are Luke and Leia going? Where's Lando going? Like, we know generally what they're trying to do, but it's so clearly it's not wrapped up. There's not a ribbon medal ceremony at the end.
Yeah.
And so it's so clearly a sequel. So it's interesting to do what you're talking about, where you're like doing all these thought experiments, because then at the end of this one, you're like, well, what could they possibly do in the next one?
So did this feel like a sequel, or did this feel like part 2 of a trilogy?
Part 2 of a trilogy.
Okay. In an unsatisfying way?
No, in a I can't wait to see what happens next kind of
good.
way.
So it's still hyped you for the next one.
Yes. Like if the movies had ended there, that would have sucked. Like, if the movies had ended, like, if only the first one came out, like, bummer, because I know how it could have been.
Right.
But, like, you're like, oh, that was a great movie. But, like, this would be like if they canceled a show before the next season came out when they really hadn't wrapped up the story. Like, that would suck. So, yeah, it feels like a second of a trilogy.
The last what if question that I had was, what if the Chosen One didn't nail the training montage and level up and go into everything fully prepared?
Right.
Luke argues and fails his way through the Yoda training.
Totally.
He struggles, he backslides, he lashes out, he's immature. And I loved the moment where he leaves Dagobah to continue the story, fully aware that he's not ready.
Yeah.
He goes and finds Darth Vader and fails again.
Right, yeah.
And it works.
Yes.
Because he's not bulletproof, he's not invulnerable, he's not calm and collected and controlled.
And at the very least, like, even as irritating as I find Luke, his motivations are solid. Like, I understand him as a character. I'm not like, why is he doing that? Like, he just cares about his friends. The same way that when he, like, the reason that he goes off in the first one is because his family is dead and he wants to figure out his past and figure out who his true parents are. And, like, he's motivated by family, whether found or blood. So that makes a lot of sense.
And as much as this movie feels like it's born of those what if questions, it never loses sight of the spirit of the first one. And that first movie is a perfect adventure. There is joy and excitement and surprise and such momentum throughout that runtime. This one has that same energy, even though it's all loss and failures and setbacks. It never becomes like a heady term paper deconstruction about these ideas and what if and subversion. It doesn't feel like that, even though that's absolutely what it is.
Sure.
And I was trying to figure out sort of why it works when it shouldn't. It should feel more like a meditation on the ideas of the first one. But it doesn't feel contemplative because there's so much happening all the time. And I think the solution, or maybe the answer there, is curveballs. And we've talked about this a lot with Sapkowski. I think he's the master of this in The Witcher, where he never does things the way you expect, which keeps your attention and surprises you and engages you.
Yeah.
There's such balance in this movie. There's an unending deluge of failures and enemies and obstacles. But to balance that out, the Leia and Han storyline is a straight rom-com with endless charm.
I love the romance in this movie.
The
I was so
chemistry's-
hoping we would get to it.
It's
I
incredible.
love it. It's so good. Like, I mean, you know, it is your classic enemies to lovers, witty banter, but like not in the cringy way a lot of it is now, and it's not like so much that like they don't want to literally murder each other. They're not insane people. They just don't get along because they like each other so much.
And that's the flirtation. That's fun.
Yes, exactly. And it builds upon the chemistry or the relationship dynamic that had been established in the first one. He keeps calling her your worship and that kind of thing. And, you know, she continues to not care about him like on the surface and continues to like try to just make her own way and do what she wants to do. But then that blossoms naturally because even if Luke and Leia didn't end up being siblings, their relationship I don't think is very good. Like their chemistry in the first one is only Luke thinks she's pretty because he's like a 12-year-old. He's like, oh, pretty girl. His whole motivation, I lied earlier. His whole motivation in the beginning of the first movie is pretty girl needs help.
And then it becomes, I don't want the guy who's cooler than me to get the girl.
Exactly.
You know?
So it's not about her as a person at all.
But when she leans over and kisses him, the first thing he does is look at Han.
Incredible.
Which is very funny. Like that's a very sincere, interesting character choice.
Yeah.
But this movie plays so well to the strengths of Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher.
Well, yeah.
And obviously Harrison Ford is more overtly charming and like a Robert Downey Jr. kind of thing.
Sure.
But Carrie Fisher is as fun
She's so
in this
good.
movie.
And that's the other thing is, like Leia would not go for a young like moron like Luke. She's
Right.
gonna go for, you know, a tall strapping man because she like, you know, like,
And that outfit they put him in
oh my gosh,
throughout this movie with the racing stripe down the pants,
it's so
and
good.
the shirt with the vest,
I like
it's
that.
So cool.
I really appreciate that they gave Leia pants. Not that a woman can't be cool in a dress, that's not what I mean, but it was just so impractical. I mean, it made sense, she had been literally captured, she's a princess, but I appreciate that. I don't think I realized how like cool she was in these earlier movies. I just assumed a lot of that was like retconned later, and they're like, oh, it's the 21st century, I guess we should be feminist now, and like made her cool.
Nope.
But she was cool from the beginning.
Cool since the 70s.
I mean, even in the first one she's cool and like
Oh,
she
yeah.
holds her own and like grabs a gun, but in this one she's like, I mean, she's like got this like huge like military strategy position, and she like knows what she's doing, and she's so cool, and I love her hair, she's great.
And it's a very good rom-com.
It is.
If you just took that part of the movie, it would work.
Well, that's why I kept wanting to cut away from Luke. I was like, yeah,
Right.
whiny baby getting his sword fighty training.
But
I want to
even
know
that-
what's happening in the romance.
But even that, it's the balance. So you've got the failure, the enemies, and the obstacles all over the place. You're balancing that out for Han and Leia with the rom-com. Mm-hmm. But to balance out Luke's philosophical exploration, he spends 2 hours arguing with a muppet. We haven't discussed that yet.
I know.
He's talking to a puppet.
Yeah, I mean,
A very goofy, like, this is not how I remember Yoda in my head. I remember him being more wise and mature.
no, he's pretty
a
goofy.
goofball.
I mean, it's the 70s, so you know.
No, I love it. But
Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't remember
It's
how
pretty
silly.
goofy.
And him kind of dancing around behind the scenes and rifling through his bag.
It
and
is so funny to look at.
It's hysterical.
Is he full CGI in all the prequels?
I think
Yoda?
so.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I am glad that, because we talked a bit in our last one about how I found the retroactive CGI to be so grating. I'm so glad he didn't do that for Yoda.
Yeah.
Because that would have been horrible. The puppet is kind of funny though. But you know.
What did you think of Yoda?
I mean, I can't say I've never been a big fan of Yoda because I like haven't seen the movies, but like he's a little green guy. I don't know. It's an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm.
I like the wise old man mentor trope. I think that's great. I have no issue with that.
But doing it with a Muppet.
It's an interesting, bold choice.
I think it works and it feels fresh.
Yeah. Oh, it's totally fresh. I do like him being so like unassuming, like Luke not knowing he's Yoda at the beginning.
Like Obi-Wan being the old man.
Well, I was going to say he probably should have like gotten a clue when he did the same thing with Obi-Wan. Like, come on, buddy.
But also that works because Obi-Wan was trained by Yoda.
Yeah, right.
So there's a chronology there.
Yeah, and you could kind of see Luke doing the same thing when he's an old hermit living on his rocky cliffside in Ireland later on.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Yeah. So
you liked Yoda as this new mentor.
He's fun. I would be curious to see, again, I have no idea what happens in the Return of the Jedi.
We were talking about this yesterday. You have no idea.
I literally have no idea. I assume they kill Darth Vader, but like I genuinely don't know.
You're one of the only people.
It's awesome. I love just living in the dark.
It's fascinating. It's such a cool little time capsule.
Yep. What I was gonna say is I don't know if they're gonna like have Yoda fight with a lightsaber. I don't know how they're gonna get a Muppet to use a lightsaber. That'll be interesting. But no, Yoda's cool. I think he might only work in this isolated swamp planet. Like, I don't think he would work on a spaceship. Like, putting him on the Millennium Falcon would be so weird. Don't tell me anything, obviously.
I won't, no.
But,
so
yeah.
the last element here, and I alluded to this before, is the droids. And I think that's the last piece of balance for all the grim stuff that makes up the plot of this movie,
right.
is the classic droid slapstick that worked so well in the rapport between C-3PO and R2-D2 in the first movie. And here you have them broken up.
Yeah.
So I thought it was handled so well because you still need C-3PO to have someone to play against. He's the straight man.
Yeah.
So you just have him literally ripped apart and beaten down. And then you develop Chewbacca as his new sort of counterpart.
Yeah,
But R2 is such a fun character that he kind of works on his own.
Yeah, and he's with Luke, you know.
But you see him worry.
Yeah.
And panic and fall in the water and swim around.
Him being thrown around in the water and the mud was like the most devastating thing I'd ever seen. I was like, no, R2.
But how impressive is that slapstick works even when you break up the power couple?
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, I think, this movie really showcases how strong all these characters are because the relationship dynamics and combinations change so drastically from the first movie. And they all still work. And if anything, you love them more. So it's impressive.
The next one's called Return of the Jedi. Do you expect that one to be more like this one or the first Star Wars? Do you expect the crew to be together? Do you think it's going to be darker, lighter, more colorful, more stark?
I think it's going to get darker. That tends to be how trilogies go, you know, especially if it's like a chosen one defeating the big bad. It tends to get darker and darker as it goes. So that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the movie ends with the crew being split, so I presume they'll be split at least for a while. But I would hope it doesn't take till the very end for them to come back together, although that would be very Tolkien-esque of George Lucas, wouldn't it?
You'll have to rehydrate Han.
Yeah.
Everyone else is together again.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to get darker. I think it's going to be more serious. I think that humor is going to stick. I don't think it's going to become full grimdark because Star Wars is just inherently fun. Like, you can't get rid of that.
Or it should be.
Yeah, right. But I mean, I think, I know there are Ewoks in this one, so something happens with Ewoks on a green planet, and I know that at some point Luke is wearing black, so I don't know if that means he gets tempted into the dark side, or if he just wants to wear a cool outfit.
Maybe he's just grumpy about the hand.
Maybe he's mourning the loss of his hand. I don't know.
He has to find out that he's related to Leia.
I was going to say, he does have to find that out. I was going to say, mild spoilers for Game of Thrones. I saw a great tweet thread. It was like, it started with, on a scale of Luke Skywalker to Jaime Lannister, how well do you handle losing your hand? And then it was like, on a scale of Luke Skywalker to Jaime Lannister, how well do you handle being attracted to your sister? How well do you handle having a like oppressive father? Like, it kept going on and on. It was very funny. I'll find that thread and put it in our Substack post because it was great.
They're both charming blondes.
Yeah, they really are.
Cool.
All right, well, this was fun.
Well, we've been doing these about once a month with Star Wars, and I think it's a fun thing to look forward to and stretch this out. So we'll probably be back with Return of the Jedi next month, but next Friday for our next episode, we'll be back with more Witcher, which is the Tower of Swallows.
Correct.
There's always a the.
Not the swallows. Think about it like Chamber of Secrets. It's not the Order of the Phoenix. It's the Chamber of Secrets. So the Tower of Swallows.
So this is book 6.
Yes.
In the Witcher series.
Yeah. Book 4/6. Yeah.
Right. So we'll be there with chapter 2.
Yep.
Cool.
So we'll see y'all then.
We are Second Breakfast Pod everywhere. That's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Gmail, and on Substack. Substack is where you can get behind the scenes stuff for every episode, all of them delivered to your inbox, right to your email at 9 a.m. on Friday every time they come out, and some bonus behind the scenes stuff. If you subscribe, you can also get a bonus episode every month and the whole backlog of 5 or 6 bonus episodes that we've already done. Cool.
Well done, Cam. And let's see if you made it to the end here. Maybe on our Substack or somehow communicate to us. Did you in fact hear our ice machine? Let us know. Not because we're going to make any change. I'm just curious for fun trivia. Okay, that's all. Toodaloo.
Bye.